make that statement available to you after this meeting. Let me just say that last Thursday to be precise, incoming COP President Sultan Al Jaber delivered remarks to heads of delegation across the street over at one of the museums here in Bonn. And he made a statement that the phase down of fossil fuels is inevitable. Now, to me, that represents an acknowledgement of the need to break the world's destructive addiction to fossil fuels. But as you've heard today, much more work remains to be done to land an agreement at Cop28 on a roadmap for a just and equitable reduction of fossil fuel production and use in a time frame that's consistent with the Paris 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. The next step must be for Dr. Al Jaber to commit to providing an open, transparent, and inclusive process at Cop28 to discuss the need to phase out all fossil fuels, in contrast with the approach that the Egyptian current presidency took at Cop27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, which was to block any discussion on this issue. And with that, we will open it up for your questions. We want questions to come from reporters. Please state your name and your outlet, and if you want to direct your question to a particular panelist, you can say so. In the front here.
Thank you, John Ainger for Bloomberg News. Following on what you've just said there, Alden, I would like to know if the panel sees a path to a commitment to phase down fossil fuels from the COP28 presidency. And in addition to that, do you think Sultan Al Jaber is the right person to deliver that commitment? Thank you.
Who would like to start with that? Anyone want to start with that one? Eric or Greta?
I think that to your second question on whether he is the right person, I think that ADNOC is on track to being one of the largest oil producers across the globe, exponentially increasing fossil fuel production. And that is not in line with the Paris Agreement. And to be able to limit a global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees, we need to stop all new oil and gas exploration. And he is not on track to do that. And it's a stab in the back for communities to see a fossil fuel CEO on top of the efforts to lead and on top of the efforts to fight the climate crisis at a time when the climate crisis is wreaking havoc on the lives of many. I think I do align with US and EU lawmakers in calling for his resignation from the role.
Anyone else want to make a comment to John's question? Maybe on the pathway to get to where we need to be in COP28? I don't know, Sebastian or Tina, if you have thoughts on the process and what needs to happen between now and Dubai?
Yeah, I think that I have been following this process for many years and from different perspectives. I think that we need to prove that we have a strong Paris Agreement and an inclusive discussion and an open debate. We need to find the right solutions, and we need to have everyone on board on this conversation. It's important to have a broader approach on the mitigation. We cannot find solutions only for the emissions management. That is not the full solution. We need to think on the whole value chain. We need to take care about production. We need to take care about consumption. We need to think about human behavior, and we also need to take care about emissions. But we need to have all of those options, all of those visions over the table. And I think that we need to surround Paris Agreement and work hard to find a consensus. That's the principle of this agreement.
Tina?
For those of us who have been here the last week and a half, and those of us who have been in the process for years or some for decades, there's no question how frustrating this process is. It's an incremental process when what we need is transformational change. But it's also a process which, when done correctly, provides a space for countries like mine to voice our real needs and concerns and to fight for those. And that's why the Marshall Islands keeps coming back year after year to do so. And we keep coming back, and it's the same this year as it is every year. Our expectations are very high because the path that we're on is so destructive. And so the responsibility of a COP president must match those expectations. And that's why we're here, to ensure that our voice is part of the chorus that says we need to keep ourselves on the path to 1.5. Anything else is unacceptable.
I think I saw a question back here, gentlemen, and I think we'll go ahead, and then the gentleman behind you, yeah.
You. My name is Tim Werner, Plant-Based Treaty News, and I'm wondering why we are ignoring the cow in the room. Everyone's talking about fossil fuels. Of course, we need to phase out fossil fuels, but there's a study from Domingo Clark et al. From 2020 that states even if we stopped fossil fuel emissions overnight, the emissions from our food system would make it impossible to limit global warming below 1.5 degrees. And last week, the IPCC panel stated that methane has the biggest contribution to immediate global warming. So why aren't we talking about changing our food systems?
Well, thank you for that question. This conference is about phasing out fossil fuels, but you're absolutely right that fossil fuels is not the only part of the problem. Maybe I can ask Claire, because I know Climate Analytics has done some work on overall GHG reductions that we need to achieve, how we need to deal with the land and agriculture systems, which are another major part of the problem.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the IPCC is very clear that we need transitions across all systems. So yes, we have to focus on fossil fuels in particular because we need such rapid cuts and because they are so emissions intensive, but we do need rapid transitions across all systems. There's no wiggle room there. In our report that we released today, we showed that total greenhouse gas emissions need to fall 8% per year and out to 2030. That's to halve by 2030. We also looked at methane, and total methane emissions need to be cut by 34%, so beyond what the Global Methane Pledge says. And that, of course, requires changes to how we produce our food. Of course, while making sure that everyone has access to healthy food. But yeah, we need systems transitions across the board.
And I would say that there have been a number of very good side events over the course of the last week and a half here. Unfortunately, I've been following the negotiations, so haven't attended as many as I want. But many good side events on global food, agriculture, sustainable agriculture, land use. I think most of those have been archived, so you can watch them later on. But there's a number of organizations here working on that important front. The gentleman 2 rows behind you in the green, and then we'll go up here and then to you.
Hi, I'm Josh Gabatis from Carbon Brief. This is mainly to the representatives from Marshall Islands and Colombia, and maybe also to Eric. Lots of developing countries here, including some major fossil fuel producers, have made it clear that their efforts to move away from fossil fuels are dependent on much more climate finance from the global north. Do you accept that argument, and what is the path forward if developed countries continue to withhold sufficient funds?
When do you want to start with that one?
The gaps are clear across the system. We need to address all of the gaps, and finance is the key to unlocking and getting the change we need, whether it's on mitigation-related issues for my country in adaptation right now, and I think Sebastian spoke to this, an entire change of the financial architecture and the systems that are fueling if I can use that word, the way we live today, that's essentially what needs to be contemplated. So I don't know, I think if your question was it's neither or, you know, the Marshall Islands, along with all of the small island developing states, have been very clear. We need the financing. We need the financing to implement, but we also need the ambition, and these two go together. It's an ambition and implementation. So we need both, and we need everyone to do it, but certainly we need those who have the most emissions and the most impacts, the major emitters. They need to move furthest and fastest, but we all need to move.
Sebastian, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks. I think that this is a very important question. I think that if countries like Colombia needs to make investment for 2 or 3 points of its GDP per year to transform its economy, it is huge. It's enormous. And there is not a single solution to do so. There is not a silver bullet to solve the climate finance problem. What we think that it's important to create the conditions, market conditions, capital conditions. We need to create the right conditions to move our economies to a decarbonized scenario. And that's the reason why we think that at the global level, there are many principles that we need to rethink. We need to change. What are the ratings? What are the considerations of the capital cost? How are we going to get the investment we need in our countries to transform our economies? And this is a problem from the global north. But we need also to create fiscal space in our countries if we want to make the public investment we need to do and take care of our people and doing our part back home. So we have been talking a lot about innovative financial solutions, different approaches. We cannot continue thinking in the same approach, thinking in loans, thinking in expensive capital to make investment. There is not a solution there. We need to find the right solutions to create fiscal space. We need to create the right solutions to reduce the cost of capital and create the right market conditions to make the investment we need in our economy. So that's a full systemic change. There is a mosaic of solutions. There is not a single solution to solve this approach, and we need to be clear on what kind of climate finance we need. So that's the reason why metrics are important. How much do we need to do what? Is that private? Is that public? We need to be transparent on the needs we have. And we need to talk all the language of investors, private investors, public investors. We need to create the conditions to transform this economy, our economies, and we need to go deeper on this. So, and this is part also of the negotiations on climate finance this week.
Thank you. And Eric, your name was mentioned. Do you want to make a comment on climate finance?
Yeah. I think your question is actually true across so many areas, including adaptation, climate finance, and of course the just transition to renewable energy, that it is dependent on financial flows from the global north. And so far, there is a commitment of $100 billion by 2020 to support global south countries in terms of climate finance, but this finance has not been met. In fact, if anything, it is not climate justice in the sense that a huge percentage of it, around 80%, has been given in form of debt, meaning that global south countries have to pay back to global north countries for a crisis they had the least role in causing. And that is why climate justice is debt justice. We need fair forms of finance to global south countries to support the just transition, to support adaptation, and even loss and damage. And so far where the money is that governments are giving a lot of money towards fossil fuel subsidies and funding the fossil fuel industry, meaning that that means that you're funding more loss and damage.
Thank you very much. I would also just note that helpfully we have a summit in Paris next Thursday and Friday that have been designed to allow governments to show how they're going to transform the global financial system. President Macron is convening a summit for a new global financial pact and it will look at not just climate finance, but the entire financial architecture that's not addressing the debt crisis, not addressing development needs, not addressing a number of sustainable development goals. And hopefully we will get some signals out of that conference that will bear fruit before Dubai and help address this issue. Let's take the next question here in the row.
Thank you. Alistair Thompson from Scoop Media. I've got a couple of questions for Greta. Firstly, you're back at the UNFCCC meeting today for the first time in some time, I think. Why did you choose to come here this week? And secondly, in relation to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, are you a supporter of the treaty, and if so, why?
I chose to go here simply because I could, and I think that if we have a possibility to try to impact something, we should. It's just as simple as that. These conferences are, of course, very difficult for young people, especially young people affected by the climate crisis from the global south. And of course, that needs to change because we can't pretend to be solving a crisis where we don't invite the people who are actually affected by the crisis. And of course, I'm very privileged in order to be here. Many of the activists in the climate movement haven't been given visas, or they have been having huge troubles with funding and accommodation and so on. So I'm very grateful to be able to be here, among many others, and I'm very aware of the fact that I am privileged to be here. And why I support the treaty is because I support everything that I think is moving us towards in the right direction. And right now, there won't be one silver bullet, one thing that solves everything. But if we put all our ideas forward, and if everyone pushes from every possible direction and angle, we will move in the right direction. And hopefully that will lead us somewhere better than we were before.
Thank you very much. Question here in the back, and then we'll come up to you here.
Matthew Carr from Kazi.org, a climate policy news site. Sorry to pick on you, Greta, but I've got two quick ones for you as well, just because you are such an important voice. A lot of the debate about fossil fuels is about scaling back, but environmental lobbyists don't seem to give the fossil fuel companies anywhere to go. By labelling carbon capture and carbon credits as fake solutions, isn't it true that you're actually standing in the way of the market reforms needed to solve the crisis? As Sebastian just mentioned, changing the market rules is absolutely essential because there's no way we're going to change global capitalism in such a quick order as 2050. And my second one, yesterday there was a fascinating press conference in Washington at the National Press Club about a 80-year cover-up by US officials and other people in the military-industrial complex about electromagnetic technology that could have solved this crisis decades ago. And this is interestingly related to the crashes of alien or UAP, UFO type craft and recovery of it. Again, it seems wild, but it's true, and it's increasingly true that it's true. If there has been an 80-year cover-up, what would be your response?
I don't think we're standing in the way of progress if we call false solutions for what they actually are. That we believe that we can replace immediate emissions cuts and phasing out fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage and the things that the fossil fuel companies are lobbying for. If we believe that will solve it, we're just trying to solve the crisis with the same mentality that got us into it. it is not possible for us, as Claire explained here. Maybe you want to talk about that a bit more, but I don't think we're standing in the way for calling things what they actually are. And if it was a cover-up, what my reaction would be, I think we would have a great time.
Yeah, I think we might need an alien invasion to get us stop fighting with each other and solve this problem, actually. Maybe that would be exactly what we need. But I would just amplify what Greta said. I think you heard from Claire their analysis showing that CCS could provide 0.1% of the emissions reduction needed in the power sector. Now, there are different views probably at this table and certainly in the environmental community about the long-term role of carbon capture and storage and whether in fact it's needed for hard-to-abate sectors or to contribute to net negative emissions that the IPCC says we need in the second half of this century. But I think we are all united in the fact that in the near term, in this critical decade, which is the purpose of the mitigation work program and what the IPCC says we need to do if we're going to keep 1.5 even barely within reach, is CCS is at best a sideshow and a distraction. It's not a major part of the near-term solution. And so to the extent that it provides false hope that somehow we can avoid the kind of reductions in fossil fuel production and use that Claire talked about in her report, it's not helpful. So I think that's the perspective we want to put it in. We've got a question here on the aisle.
Thank you. Thais Lara from Canal de la Ciudad. I have two questions for Tina and Sebastian, maybe following the first question of my colleague. How do you see possible to work on a phase out and not a phase down, as the Cop28 president mentioned of fossil fuel in the Cop28 decision, considering, again, and maybe more in depth, the conflict of interest that he represents, but also the strong differences that we are seeing here, even just to approve an agenda. And for Eric and Greta, there are some climate youth organizations that are supporting the exploitation of gas in the name of development and in the name that that is a resource for the transition. What is your opinion on that, or how the movement work globally in such crucial themes as these ones? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So first is Sebastian for the question about the COP president and the path forward.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I don't know if we need to wait until Thursday to have a more clear understanding of this, but what I say in a previous intervention is that we need a broader approach. There is an approach from the phase down, but there is other approach for the phase out. And those are political signals. Those are also economic signals. The position of Colombia is we need to go for phased out of fossil fuels. We understand that the current fossil fuels infrastructure is enough. We don't need more fossil fuels infrastructure for under development. We need to grow our renewable matrix. We need also to manage energy inefficiency. We need to manage energy consumption. We need to change behaviors. So that's the approach. So that's important to have clear political signals for those countries like Colombia who needs to go for a different approach. And be transparent with civil society, be transparent with other stakeholders out of this conversation, explaining them what are the differences, what it implies. What is the approach if I'm going for the phase down? What is the approach if I'm going for the phase out? And this is a transparency matter, and I think that it represents different approaches, it represents consensus, and it is part of the conversation we have here. So let's see.
Thank you, Sebastian. And Eric and Greta, do you want to respond to the question about the youth groups that are supporting gas expansion? Do you want to answer the question about the youth groups that are apparently supporting increased production of fossil gas?
Yeah, we keep coming back to the term like false solutions. Fossil gas is often being described as a transition fuel and something with lower emissions, when it is in fact further locking us into fossil fuel dependency. Gas is still a fossil fuel, and something that, if we want to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis, something that we cannot lock ourselves further into. And of course, did you say that some parts of the youth movement are advocating for it? I don't know these parts of them, so I can't speak on behalf of them. But I think that our general message, at least in the part of the climate movement I'm in, is that we need to move away from all fossil fuels and all false solutions that actually will increase our emissions of greenhouse gas in the long term.
And just to jump in quickly and also add that climate justice in the context of gas is fossil gas is not just about the carbon emissions, but also about land justice, where this gas is being mined on communities' lands who are affected and by the health issues that result from it. So we're not just calling for phasing out of fossil fuels, which includes fossil gas, is not just about the carbon aspect, the carbon emissions aspect, but also about land. It's also land justice. It's also about health justice. There are so many aspects to it.
Thank you. And Tina wants to make one final response to the question, and then we will have to close the press conference.
I just want to recall something that my colleague and friend said at the end of last year's COP, after loss and damage, the loss and damage fund had been agreed. And she was speaking about working for fossil phase out at this COP, and it was that our experience shows that it's possible to take in that step. I recall also back in leading up to 2015, we were told 1.5 was completely unrealistic, a pie in the sky, and something only really the islands and the most vulnerable were calling for. And now everything backs it up, and it's enshrined in the Paris Agreement. I don't say these things to say that you just have faith and it's going to happen, or you set an unrealistic goal. No, you have faith that that is the absolute necessary direction for everyone, and you do what needs to be done to get there. You do and that includes talking to everybody in the process, looking for all the levers that you can outside of the process, because we can only do so much here. It's why we're fighting so hard in the IMO, which could, if it makes the right decisions, transition and fully decarbonize. It has a pathway. The technology is there, and it could do it in such a way that actually provides funds to those of us who are suffering the most from climate change. So there are pathways. There's so many great ideas. There's so many solutions. And the science has given us some of those solutions, and those who are actually the most vulnerable have come forward because they see what's needed and they say, this is what's needed. We just need to work together to do it. So you can do the impossible is possible if everyone is together going in the same direction.
Thank you very much, everyone. It reminds me of Nelson Mandela's famous quote, "It always seems impossible until it is done." So with that, we will end the conference, and thank you all for coming.
Ja, aber... Excuse me? Excuse me? Sorry. Die Frage ist, was sie jetzt macht, ne? Eigentlich sollte sie noch gleich zuhören. Sie geht auf Toilette. Und dann ist sie... Ist das hier? Toll. Ich weiß nicht, was hier ist, aber eigentlich hätte man gesagt, oben der Lobby. Joiner. Könnte aber auch hier sein.
Ist es denn definitiv bestätigt?
Die Neubauten, das gesagt, also warum sollte ich mich anlügen?
Wo ist die denn?
Tja, das ist eine gute Frage.
Aber das ist doch total...
I don't work on the oceans portfolio. I work on the climate
Ja, die Frage ist, was das ist, ne?
Wisst ihr, ob die Greta dann hierher kommt?
Ja, ich hätte mal gehört, dass sie in 14 noch was macht, aber es könnte auch oben in der Lobby sein. Ich weiß nicht, ob das Neubau oder wird das hier sein? Ich weiß das hier, ja. Fast kommt jetzt hier rüber.
Dann stellen wir uns hier vorne hin, okay?
Kannst du mir aus dem Bild? Danke.
Ich muss immer fragen. Sorry, wo stellen wir uns mit den Kameras am besten hin?
Wir stehen da. Ich glaube,
Warum fragt ihr die überhaupt? Lass uns doch erstmal anfangen und dann gucken wir, wo wir stehen.
Was ist denn los hier?
Ja, wo wir uns hinstellen wollen. Ich weiß nicht, wenn wir sowas fragen. Oder? Wir gucken jetzt einfach, was passiert.
Luisa, I need you just... No, no, no.
Kommt jetzt hier durch, ich glaube, das wird nicht kommen. Ich muss eigentlich rüberkommen. Nee, da bin ich aus dem Tag mal nicht mitgegangen. I think the best thing is to get this started and then we see where we can go. I think there's no media coming.
we can't talk.
You did great. Why are you texting me in the middle of shooting? I know. And then I realized that messages were actually, so I just got off the laptop. That I know what.
Und dann sehen wir, was passiert. I'm very careful. I watch my steps. I promise to try my best for you.
Great job. Yeah. Nailing it. I was saying that it should have been a hospital.
A snake? Is it a snake? No.
Oh yeah. No, this is fine after. Did you not check your charger or like to see if you have a charger? No, oh, you have. Oh, I was like, oh, if you just look at mine while it's here, and then I'll bring yours tomorrow. Yeah, just like it creates like a constant. Yeah, exactly.
Wenn du Bild willst, ne?
Put your arms on the bed back, please. We are starting. I love you.
Protest is there.
Move the bed back, please. Then we can start.
Protest there.
Protest is there.
Guys, can we focus on the action? I'm not involved.
That's leer, ne?
I think standing there would be better because the cameras actually get the action rather than just staring at the crowd, but it's fucking annoying.
Bitte starten. Ja, die können einfach anfangen. Die sind, machen immer alles kompliziert, weißt du? Das ist immer so kompliziert.
Start.
So, it would be great.
Ja, das macht Sinn. Ich würde sagen, lass erst mal anfangen, dann sehen wir, wo wir uns hinstellen können. Ja? Aber es bringt jetzt nichts zu sagen, stellt euch dahin.
Ah, there are many others. We have 11 speakers already. They have not things already said. So maybe if it's okay for you, Greta, to join, you're going to see some people joining. If what? No, what? Yeah. So if you join, you're going to see some people joining, taking some change, but you can stand in solidarity, holding one of the posters of people. If you don't mind, come to this corner. Then, yes, but then, okay. And I will appreciate the cameras that stand here so that we can coordinate it. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Well, I think the best way is to start now.
So can you come please with me? Can you come please with me? Can you please come with me? They can come from where they are. They can come right from where they are. But they don't know when.
Ja, ich auch nicht. Aber ich weiß, dass ich da nichts sehe.
Can you please? Thank you. Come on, go on. against the life of coercion and the prison's grave, against the color of the cell walls, against the iron's logic, against the sensation of the sun behind the bars and the wires, against the prison, uniform and food, against the shining light in my cell 24/7, against the 20 minutes of the allowed time for the prison visit, against the ban of pens and papers, against the ban of lighters, against the ban of all colors but white, the ban of white, against the 1,912 nights in which I only saw the moon once, and just by chance, against every dream that dies over time. I joined all my wasted dreams. Dreams of love, dreams of home, establishing a family, fatherhood in my 30s, being beside my little sister in every hard step she takes in the sea of life, my dance with her on her big night, being there for my mom and dad as they are slowly devoured by time, against myself, against every day I get away from the human inside and become a concrete thing, in a concrete place, under a concrete law. Against all this, and to say what is left on the 1st of June, I will start a life strike to regain my life back. This is Galal El-Beniri message from May 2023, announcing an escalation of hunger strike, refusing to take fluids after 80 days without eating, in protest against his continued unjust detention. As he has stated, his strike will continue until he regains his freedom, either alive or dead. Galal is an Egyptian poet arbitrarily detained since 5th of March 2018 because of his poetry. Galal's health has significantly deteriorated due to torture and inhumane detention conditions over the 5 years of imprisonment. In Galal's letter from the 5th of March of this year, announcing his hunger strike, he stated, I quote, "In the past, I used to know that if one wallet or car was stolen, they would go to the nearest police station and get help. But I do not know who would help that whose life is being stolen. We were brought up to know the concept of country to be vast, astonishing, an amazing entity. But why this entity has reduced to the space of a meter in a cell inside a prison? Why this amazing entity turned into a terrifying freak with a principal role to destroy this son's life and obliterate everything that is beautiful and human in them? This is the reality of many environmental, social, and community leaders, defenders, who resist our lives, who resist the oppression of an extractivist system, of the institutions that replace life of dignity and with freedom. People who with their voice, their art, and their imaginaries advocate for a world where the right to a clean, healthy, and safe environment is a reality for all. Today we join in solidarity for those voices that have tried to be silenced. Those who stood up for our environment, our present, and our rights. With those being harassed and criminalized for defending our homes, our livelihoods, and our future. There can no be climate justice without human rights. Free Galan and Beheri, free them all.
This is the story of Emirati Dr. Ahmed Al-Zabi. He's a university professor and a former judge. He was detained on March 26, 2012. He was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment as part of a mass trial of 94 activists who peacefully claimed for government reform. A number of international human rights organizations have found that the trial violated vigilance due process rights. Throughout Dr. Al-Zabi's detention period, as well as during the trial itself, authorities denied him access to an attorney. As he requested to see a warrant during his initial arrest, he was later charged with obstruction of justice. The warrant was never presented.
Shall we go? Can we leave the cameras outside? You want no cameras here? Okay, then we go. Yeah, we go. It's no problem. We go.
They don't want
It's no problem. It's no problem. No, we do something else. It's no problem. Just leave it.
To prevent him from sleeping and denied him use of glass bags. They consistently deprived him access to the bathroom, and when they did allow him, they would systematically humiliate him. He was subjected to various forms of torture, such as denailing, blindfolding, and forced removal of clothing. Officers reportedly beat him, causing a variety of injuries, and denied his request for medical care. In his own words, Dr. Al-Zabi said, I quote, "They put me in a separate prison, and they interrogated me about the organization. They used force with me to compel me to sign statements that I had no idea. They compelled me to sign and give my fingerprints, and they threatened me with revocation of nationality." On March 26, 2022, he finished serving a sentence of 10 years in prison, but is still awaiting release. Dr. Al-Zabi called for change in government reform. How will we reach the world we want if people cannot speak up about how they want their world to be? There can be no climate justice without human rights.
Ich gucke jetzt mal an. Ich gucke jetzt mal an. You can go, huh? Should we win speaking? No, and she don't. We tried to film you from the media, and they said, go away, they don't want you that close, so you can go, right? So if they want any media, and they can have no media. I'm happy with that. I mean, that's what they deserve, huh? Yeah, scared. checken, was dann sagen, hier keine Media, wir wollen euch nicht. Dann sage ich, okay, dann gehen wir halt, ne?
Ich verstehe überhaupt nicht Justice. Alle sollen freigelassen werden, ich weiß überhaupt nicht, was das für eine Demo war.
Hello.